or is it just us and then you'll publish it?
It's live. We're live right now.
Okay.
Yeah, we're live right now, and then it's live right now. So for everyone following and listening, if you've been following the series right now away, you know what we're up to, and then also you were just chatting about, is it live? It'll be available on LinkedIn, and then it'll also produce a new podcast. So I'll follow up with that at the very end of it. So, well, today, everyone, thanks for listening in and tuning in. Today we've got Keith Loranger from Notaire. Interesting perspective on the development side of things, which we haven't talked too much about, which is very exciting. It's obviously a huge part of the business. And I think, things to dig in on the development side of things is also like multiple stakeholders that you've got to kind of sell along the way. So plenty of room to explore there. Now, for everyone listening in, maybe the first time we talk about getting to hell yes. Getting to hell yes is about talking about the buyer's journey and recognizing that there are multiple different kind of like conceptual buyers out there. So agreement, consensus, all these things are moments we've got to like commit someone to change. And in a perfect world, when we're doing or not, and the easiest way to do this thing is to solve problems for people versus persuading them or getting to kind of like to buy into maybe my way of thinking or Keith's way of thinking. But really what we want to be in the hell yes world is that people who are seeking to solve a problem, maybe they've already tried to solve the problem and they can't. And so they're seeking an alternative that kind of like unblocks their success. So this is kind of what hell yes feels like. So great, thrilled to have Keith on today. As we always kick it off, Keith, a little bit about your background. How'd you end up in this role? And then what's a problem you guys solve at Notaire?
All right, great. Well, thank you again for inviting me to come on. I love talking about the industry that I'm in, and I love every opportunity that I get to share with others what my perspective is on it. And I also love learning about what other people's experience has been as well. So whether you or your people listening in have exposure to sort of the process of developing and building out real estate, I think that this could, be something that would be interesting for somebody who has very little or even more experience. So I'm excited to share that and how I approach thinking about this. So thank you for that.
Oh, appreciate it. I mean, we're all looking to learn. So lay it on us. So your background.
So I started out my career as an architect right out of grad school, which was right around like 2011. So we're just coming out of the recession. There was a little bit of momentum in the markets picking up, but things were still a little sluggish. Started with, got a great opportunity with a global design firm called Gensler, and they do projects all over the world, and was based out of Boston, which was where I've been based out of since. And was working on a variety of different types of projects and really started to specialize in corporate campuses and corporate workplace. So doing both sort of the interior side fit out as well as ground up new development and renovation with those types of clients. As I continued working on those projects, we started working with developers who were doing more neighborhood scale development. So within urban centers as well as outer rings, developing, acres of real estate in dense urban markets, which was really a sort of a special niche. But that sort of development shared a lot of principles with the corporate campus developments that we're doing. And what I think a lot of these companies, and whether it was on the corporate side, build to suit, or speculative development, working with developers who are looking to build a product and then lease it, or they might have already had a tenant lined up for those. I think one of the common threads is they were really looking for placemaking that created engagement for their for those places. And I think it was referred to a little bit differently as this process was happening. But I think now with the emergence of technology, I think that's probably the best way to describe what we were trying to generate. And that's been a common thread since. So was doing that as an architect for about 8 years, and then had the opportunity to switch over to the owner side, more so managing projects in-house for them. So again, it's still involved with the same process, just a sort of a different seat at the table, representing the owner, from their end, and then curating that process for them instead of being an architect.
In both cases, when you're representing the owner or in the architecture firm, are you involved in the development process all along the way, like in both cases, or are you kind of like sharing different roles?
Yeah, it kind of depends on the nature of the relationship as an architect. Sometimes with longer term relationships where you're working on multiple projects, you might be more plugged in at the front end to what's going on in development. If it's a client that has already sort of teed that part of the process up, you might have less exposure to it. But again, where I was working with clients that I had long-term relationships with, I was seeing more of the development side. And then, different clients that I worked with as an architect had different levels of experience developing. So even for corporate clients that were doing, they had a large portfolio of real estate that they needed to, maintain or develop new or expand or renovate. They might have internal teams, but with varying levels of, experience doing that. So when you're working with these clients over and over again, I really got to create some processes and some things that would help them just with sort of consistency and rigor and how we were, doing those projects, and then was able to apply those systems and processes to the developers, who again, different users have different needs for their real estate. Or on the sort of like corporate side, might not necessarily be using their real estate as a revenue producer. But it is an operational need for them. So it falls under the operational sort of cost side of their business versus when you're working with like a developer, that is their product, that is their line of business. So the needs were the same. You need to keep costs low. You need to, be able to deliver projects on time. There's lots of different stakeholders that are involved with both, types of clients, but the needs of the projects were similar in many ways. So after having the opportunity to build some processes on the design side that I saw that really benefited, the clients and the owners on their end, I wanted to have the opportunity to spearhead that from, from the owner side, and then. From there, worked with a couple of different developers who are working on sort of large-scale neighborhood type developments, where you have acres of property with multiple buildings going up, as well as the infrastructure that's related to that. And did that for another 5 or 6 years, and then decided to launch my own enterprise where I'm now providing these services as a consultant. Would love to, start getting back to the principal side eventually, but right now I'm just providing this to other owners as a service.
Gotcha. And when you take a look at the list that the stakeholders there, let's just talk about an ownership group. Typically the problem, what's the difference between the problem that an inexperienced ownership group versus an experienced ownership group? What are they trying to solve? What's different between the two of them that they're trying to solve?
I think the challenges that people face when they're going into the building industry is really that you're dealing with all of your project team as third party. So you're dealing with all third party vendors to provide the services to bring your project to life. Whereas a lot of businesses or other operations might be more accustomed to having an in-house group, a team that's designing and executing whatever their product is, and having more insight and control into how that process takes place. When you're working in the building industry, all of that is outsourced. So everybody is essentially servicing you in your project for fee. And that includes the design side, your architect, your designers, your engineers, any other additional consultants that you need expertise on, as well as the contractors who are building. They are essentially set when you sign a contract with them. You're paying them a fee to perform their service, and there's also other project management sort of contracts that can outline where the risk is and how they're being paid. But essentially everybody is an outside team that you're engaging. And that means that if you have a owner or client who is less sophisticated, they might just have less experience managing those kinds of teams and understanding what the right way to manage communications is, what kind of contracts you'd be solving or signing, what's the right contract to be using depending on the type of project that you're doing. That's all very different than if these are internal teams that you're managing and dealing with. So having an expert who really has seen that process from beginning to end, from the very planning, stages of development, all the way through to operations and turnover and operations, is a real asset. And the real differentiator that I've tried to present is having a very unique project audit tool
Oh,
that I use, which really, is a much more detailed and hands-on approach to quality control
yep.
than you might get with somebody who's basically providing a project administrative service, where they'll get you from beginning to end, but their insights into the very technical details of the project might be somewhat limited, or they might not be as willing to take as much of a hands-on approach to quality control.
Well, I imagine that quality control risk is a well, I'm sure it's a spectrum, but the quality control spectrum gets greater the more third party that you use versus when you're using internal. Is that a fair guess?
Well, you'll be mostly using in a traditional design bid build process that most developers and owners typically use. You're mostly using all third party, but construction contracts are essentially usually set up so that you have contingencies to mitigate risk. So you'll have typically an owner's contingency, which is money that the owner set aside for unexpected changes and things that they'll be responsible for during building for compensating the team for. But then the contractor typically also has their contingency, which is covering them for things that they might miss in buyout or other things. So there's different contingencies that are set up to accommodate different things, and it's kind of just become a custom now. It's just commonly accepted that you're going to blow through that contingency. I mean, I hate to say it, that's just the reputation the industry has, and people kind of don't question it anymore. That you're going to, have to use that for all the unforeseen things that are going to come up during a project. But part of that reason is because very few people have the technical insight outside of the design team and the construction team to be able to mitigate that risk at the front end. So it's just there because, you just can't catch everything. But my approach has been, well, actually, in practice, you can catch a lot of these things, or at least make the client or developer aware of where the risk is going to be, so that you're aware of it when you are signing your contracts. And if you have the time, you can try and resolve these issues before you have to, pay a premium for solving them, after you signed your contracts to go build. But a lot of times, if a project is moving really quickly, you don't have the time to, catch them before you're signing contracts and, putting shovels in the ground. But at least about them before it's the 11th hour, and you're paying even more of a premium and your schedule is slipping. So there's different ways that you can approach how you want to mitigate these issues with a client. But the differentiator for me has always been, let's make sure that we're aware of these before it's really detrimental to the project budget, schedule, operational concerns.
Have you ever seen that? There's an image that was floating around years ago, and it was a yacht, and the yacht was called Change Order, and the little Binny boat that runs you back and forth was called Original Contract.
You
know what I mean? Yeah. I did a lot of quality assurance work in the back end of my consulting career, and we did a ton of quality assurance. Basically, we had methodologies. Well, implementation was based on a specific methodology, and that methodology would spit out quality assurance steps, right? And so we would gate the quality assurance steps and rate, basically red, yellow, green, a risk register on certain elements of the project so they can move things forward, plan accordingly. Are we going to slip? Time, cost, quality, and what's going to happen, right? And so I get you from there. And I found it was easier. I did this when I was on my own. I found it was easier to get quality assurance work on my own because I wasn't in conflict of trying to go and win the implementation work or design work. Do you find, so kind of like, I just want to kind of get to a stage gate of this conversation. When you're talking about where you're at right now, are you looking at are you selling quality assurance and risk mitigation, or is it and if you were to force rank, is it risk mitigation or is it cost mitigation?
So I kind of I think of them as sort of combined. And again, I could take out, I could provide the audit service outside of project delivery if a client was looking for that. So actually, one of the things that's kind of come up is investors that might not be executing the project themselves are saying, hey, we'd like to have a project audit of the team that we're working with, that we're investing with. so that we can understand what the capabilities of the team look like from an outside perspective, as well as the contracts, which are a design contract. And architects are basically like kind of lawyers who design contracts through drawings and specifications. So they'll say, can you look at our drawings? Can you look at the specifications and, help us determine if we have some risk here that will present itself through, change orders and whatnot later on in the project.
Right.
Because we have a budget right now, we have our contingencies, but, being able to, if you don't have to spend contingencies, that just means you're saving more money. And a lot of times, I think another reason the construction industry has sort of operated the way it has without additional quality, tools set up to help mitigate at the front end is you can somewhat amortize bad projects over the course of a loan.
Sure.
So if you, depending on project size, let's say you have $100 million project, if you have a contingency that's an owner's contingency at 3 to 5%, and you have a contractor's contingency that it's another percentage of the project, that could be millions of dollars. But when you amortize that over the cost of the construction loan over however many years that is with your investment group or your bank, however you're financing your project, that is smaller, but it's still not great because that's just less money that's going to productive use for the investors or the developer's cause. So I think for reasons like that, it's just become commonly expected that, you have a contingency, you spend your contingency, but it's all included in your project budget. And, you get approval from your investment committee for the total project budget. So that's what you're allowed to spend. But the question becomes, would you rather spend that money or would you rather save that money and put it towards something else?
Well, it all depends this is where the conflict comes, right? It all depends on who's running it. I mean, as a PM, often you benefit from spending that contingency.
Yes.
So it's like, there's a conflict there. This is why, we saw in project implementations, ton of demand for quality assurance resources, because this is what I did for 3-4 years, was basically trying to make sure that you were, the implementer was being true to basically the kind of the job was to make sure that interests were aligned, right? Because there is a conflict of the change order, or at least increasing the scope or spending the contingency. I mean, in many cases, we would just plan to spend the contingency, and no matter what. And that was then you end up, asking for more money once the contingency has been spent.
Yeah.
Do you find that, so when people are looking out there, given the different stakeholders, is there, actually one more question. We talked about the investor stakeholder. There's the management company stakeholder. Is there an insurance stakeholder as well in this side of things? For the project, not post-delivery, but not post, but is there insurance for the commissioning piece, the construct and commission piece before commissioning?
Yes. So I'm not sure if I fully understand the question. I mean, there's typically, insurance both on the owner side and the contractor side.
Yeah.
As far as you're
talking
about
liability, but project execution insurance, do people try and hedge? Let's say the project's $300 million.
Yeah.
Is there an insurance that someone's taken out with respect to getting to the finish line, or no?
Aside from, I'll call errors and omissions insurance, which is again more on the
that's kind of
side.
normal stuff.
I think you're saying there are different ways to structure a deal or structure a contract with your whoever's delivering the project to if you're trying to meet certain schedule obligations or whatnot, that you can factor risk into that where if the contractor isn't meeting the delivery, they're essentially losing money on the job because they're now paying for days past. So that's one way that an owner might be able to strategically factor in I don't know if that's the same kind of thing you're talking about where I'm
just curious. What I'm curious about is from a quality assurance perspective, the nature of the question is from a quality assurance perspective, is there another stakeholder that's interested in the report? Right. So, would they, if this isn't something that's used in this business, we don't need to dig in on it any further. I've seen it in other businesses where they've got kind of delivery insurance that the construction company might take, or the implementer might take in order to offset any sort of potential risk. And then they mitigate that with a quality assurance role, so that the quality assurance role can then report back to mutually to the insurer and to the owner, so that they're getting a different story than what's being told from the GC.
Yeah, I haven't seen it as much from the client owner side.
Yeah.
But in terms of the contractor, that might be something that they do to hedge that risk. That might be one area that I would have less insight into.
Yeah. No, it's
in
just
terms of
curious.
how yeah.
Really just curious. So when you talk about when you're going to market, what is the principle? Like, what's someone Googling and then Notera is going to show up? Like, what would they be looking for? What search term are they putting in?
So again, I think it probably would depend on the level of experience that somebody has in running projects. And like I said, some of the clients that I work with or have worked with, have entire departments and internal teams that are responsible for, delivering projects for an organization. Whether it's, like I said, a project that is going to be a revenue generator for them or an operational, piece of their business.
Yeah.
So I think somebody that would want to be working with us would be somebody who's very, very cost conscious. And they're saying, listen, we have really tight budgets, or we want to be able to save that money and not be, spending into our contingency, or projects are getting delayed and, we're not meeting our operational objectives. Anybody that's, trying to figure out how to improve that process is going to be the kind of person that's going to be wanting to talk to an organization like mine, where we're really spending our time and energy helping with a more hands-on approach, iron out the delivery of projects, so that you're not, having to, spend those extra dollars and, push your schedules. So, it could be somebody who's very sophisticated and wants to, get even better or find, new tools and ways of doing that. Or it could be somebody who's saying, hey, we have a very high bar and expectation for the projects that we're delivering. They're going to be very complex. They're going to be very creative. But we really need somebody who's going to be hands-on with delivering these. And typically my services pay for themselves in the change orders you don't spend. And that's really I think the compelling argument for. And there's also different ways to structure my fee. A lot of project managers will do it on a percentage of project costs, which is what you're saying. They might be more incentivized to. Maybe that's unfortunate that someone would want to do that. But if the project gets more expensive, you get more money. But we can also do it on a monthly fee, where it's sort of separated from the project cost. There's different ways to do that as well.
So then when you're preparing, like, so let's say, like, what's repeatable in your business? Is it like, and I mean, in terms of, like, what do you want to be, what can you be best, what's Notera best in the world at? What's your IP? Like, what are the things that you are investing in to become different in the market, so that the market would choose you over the other alternatives that are out there?
It's really, I'll call it project audit.
Mm-hmm.
The specific things that I've honed in on and pinpointed are the things that are most commonly, seen as project ads and change orders. So, and again, I have typically worked on sort of very large projects that have a certain, set of issues that emerge, and they're typically, I'll say that they are specific, but they're sort of within a realm of area that emerges as the root cause being sort of project speed. And these things typically emerge in response to that. So there's often also where the MEP systems, the engineering systems, handshake with the architectural elements. So these sort of very specific things that I'm looking at are commonly occurring. And it depends on, again, the nature of the project. If you have more time, you can set the project up, and you have a very large project. I sometimes recommend having more of an involved peer review process, where it's typically required on the structural side. where you have to have another structural engineer come in and kind of check the homework of the structural engineer who's contracted to do the work, where they're saying, okay, we're going to have another company that's going to come in and review the calculations, review that because it's a safety concern. But I've actually recommended on even larger projects that we start to broaden that to third-party reviews of other systems as well, especially if it's a couple $100,000 for a third-party review of systems where one change order might equal that cost. And when you have multiple adding up, it makes sense. If you have a leaner project where you're saying, hey, we just want to make sure that we're covering our bases on common issues that keep emerging, that's when we can do that internally without having to bring third parties in to do that review.
And is
we have audits that do that.
Is it audited at stage gate, or is it at what point in the project is because like I've done audits on even the procurement of a project, right? Like even before we've kind of like this is not shovel ready, but like before we've kind of initiated the blueprint.
For me, it's really the audit is most effective before you sign your construction contract, because that's when you have the ability to resolve things before they go to bid, because any changes that you're making after you bid is through a non-competitive process. So you've now lost your ability to get competitive pricing for the changes. And also on the design side, when you have to make design changes, whether it's the owner saying, I want to make a change, or the contractor saying that this isn't going to work, we need to make this change. Or again, it's maybe not a good example because you might be covered in that case, but you're also paying fee to your design team to make changes after the fact. So a lot of times when you're making changes, even I don't think the VE process, which is used, I think, from a lot of teams to make compelling arguments to owners, why they're saving costs. The VE process isn't really that efficient because you end up paying non-competitive pricing to make these, to make the material changes or the labor changes, or the labor that's required to make the changes. But you're also paying a premium for your design fees, which also sometimes aren't recognized as an offset to those value engineering costs. So the most that you can get baked in correctly before you go sign your construction GMP is really how you're best set up for executing the project during construction. And again, even if you don't have the ability to make the changes before you go sign your GMP, at least with the audit, as close to being done early on as possible after you sign your contract, you're not finding out the projects too late in the game. Where
just for everyone listening here, GMP versus VE.
GMP is your guaranteed maximum price. So that's typically the most common contract that's used for construction that I see and that I like, because it, the way that risk is assigned in the project, it's I think the most favorable for an owner. GMP is your guaranteed maximum price. That means that the contractor has bid out the scope of the design that the design team has, the contracts they've written, and they're saying this is what we're going to build your project for. This is the maximum price, pending any changes that might come about. And then, sorry, what was it? There was GMP, and what was the other?
Value engineering.
Value engineering. Yeah. So that's when the team is basically saying, okay, we have exceeded what our budget might have allowed, and now we are going to go and try and find some competitive ways to provide something comparable at a lesser price. And that can be done before the contract is signed or after. Again, anything you're doing before the GMP is signed is giving you a more cost-effective bid.
So if you're looking for leads for your business, are you looking at development permits and like the days the development permit has been when it was issued, or is the development permit, is that already passed? Like,
are you saying,
like when you're looking for leads for Natera, like where do they come from, and what's a good timing indicator that the contract hasn't been signed yet, but you can go talk to those people and say, hey, I realize you're spending $100 million to build this building. Have you considered this, or how are you mitigating that? And you can have that opening conversation about growing your business and solving the problem for them. Like, at what point do they realize, like what point in their journey do they realize that they've got a problem they need to solve from an audit or QA perspective? and that they're going to go looking for that solution?
So the building industry is very relationship oriented.
Yep.
So what I've found is I can cold call people and I can send them emails and I can give them very compelling reasons why we can save them money. The fact is the owners in the building industry are being bombarded by people offering all sorts of cost savings tools.
Sure.
What they really want is a relationship or a referral to tell them, yes, we got real results from these guys. So I found that to be always the most effective way to find new business and to find people that I can help is by people that I've worked with in the past know, yes, this is a real deal. They can actually do the things, they can actually deliver on the things that they're saying they've done. And also people that are referring to them saying, hey, these guys did this project. These were the results of that project. So if there are people that are interested, whether they're an owner or a client that might need project help, obviously through things like this, if they're interested, I'm always happy to share more about like what our process is and learn more about what their needs are and where there might be an opportunity to overlap. But really, it's a referral business, and it's always seems to have been that way.
I mean, so agree with you on there. I mean, what's interesting about the referral side of things is that like referral is response to a request, right? Like, if you're not building a building right now, the referral would be kind of a waste of air. So like, when does somebody seek a referral for the problem that you solve?
Yeah, it could be, it's always better to be able to get on board right at the beginning of their project when they've got the idea, that whether they're, again, if it's an operational client, they're saying we're going to need space for whatever use, to be able to get working with them right from the get-go to help them build that team and create a strategy for how that project is going to come together. And if it's a revenue producing asset for a developer or whatnot, to be able to start working with that client right from the beginning to help them develop their look at how they're putting their investment analysis together, and then start to develop that pro forma and start thinking about how that becomes real sooner and how you create the strategy for executing that project in a risk measured way.
So if you were to grow like beyond your referral network, how would you unblock that?
Part of this is for my business being a consulting, essentially business service business. I can help clients, but at some point scale means more bodies. So to do this in a disciplined way, I really need to be training people that I'm bringing on with the process that we're using, so that when a client comes to us, and again, this is something that I think a lot of people in the building industry knows, it's not necessarily the company that you hire, it's the team that you get within that company. And to me, I want any client that's working with us to know that you're getting a level of consistency between whoever you're working with. So where I have developed these tools and this audit process, and the clients that I'm working with are getting the results that they want, I can only scale when I have more people that can do, the things that clients are expecting from that business. So it wouldn't make sense for me at this stage to take on a ton of work that I can't handle myself. But I do want to work with clients that do have that high expectation for what we can provide, which is the most dynamic, the most complex projects, in the most that are delivered in the most disciplined way.
When I was in consulting, like what I found as a differentiator when we were selling to anybody, really, it was like, if you didn't have a methodology, you were really going to be competing on price. And like the methodology made it easier to buy, because here I'm showing you at the earliest part of the conversation, here's what the methodology of this quality assurance agreement, engagement is going to look like. Here's where who's going to talk to. Here's how I'm going to talk to them. Here's the questions I'm going to ask. Here's the different things we're going to rate it. It's going to be a red light, red, yellow, green. And then we're going to kind of provide mitigating factors. Do you go to the next step? Maybe is payment released, right? Because often there's milestone payments associated to a quality assurance audit. And then ultimately, do we go and how do you bring forward budget to mitigate some of these gaps, or are we green lights all around, right? And like in the consulting business that I was in, by putting that methodology forward, you were really presenting a thoughtful, solution to what the customer is looking to buy, principally because you're demonstrating your experience in a 4 chevron diagram that says, blueprint, deployment, or engineering, and then whatever it is, commissioning and operating. And like those 4 different stages have their own different quality assurance steps to it. It does a couple of things, kept me engaged throughout the entire project rather than kind of coming at the very end, there's nothing I can do about it. And showing the customer that I know what I'm talking about, rather than making it up on the fly, or we're going to figure it out when we get there. And so those things, like, I commend you for having that IP already kind of like thought through and built in, because it's something that we won or lost deals based on that methodology. And then to your point, from a scale perspective, if you bring people on, you onboard them to the methodology, and you begin to de-risk the delivery of the quality of delivery that you're delivering on. It's Notair's brand, because you have a methodology that's assigned to the way you do things. Because the customers, ultimately, how you described it, it is they do want to buy the people, but not all people are infinitely available. And so they ultimately have to trust the system that you're selling.
Mm-hmm.
And then trust you to fill it with the right people, that they know how the system works, so that they can de-risk the people risk that's native to having, Keith in a seat versus like Keith A, Keith B, Keith C, Keith D, because those different people are all going to follow the same system, which is going to give predictability around the output, which is going to help me de-risk the project that I'm trying to, or the cost, the risk, the timeline risk, or the cost risk that I'm looking to mitigate.
Yeah.
And so like when we would talk in the market, we would talk a lot about this methodology that we would push forward, because we knew that we had like placement risk or placement friction when it came to people. But ultimately, here's what you're buying, the 4 chevrons across the top. Here's the system. And then, trust us to run the system over and over again. Right.
Yeah.
And then when your buyers come along, so you get your leads through referrals. Do they have a time wall? Like, is there something happening in their life that they have to make a decision by?
So it again depends on the client.
Yeah.
If it's a developer, their needs might be dictated by the leases that they're signing. So, for example, if they're building a building or doing a project for a tenant, their requirements for delivery are outlined within that lease. If it's an operator who might be the tenant. So again, we're kind of talking about both sides here, because I'm working, both with the developers and typically with the tenants, or somebody who's building out for their operational uses. If it's for them, again, that might be described by the needs of their lease, or the parameters for what that is going to be providing them operationally. So
Right.
if it's, I've worked with clients who are building a corporate campus, and they need to bring that campus online because they know they're going to have so many bodies that they need to put,
Right.
put in seats and workplace by a certain date. So there's different measures of need. But we can assess that with them. And the thing is, when I start working with a client, this is part of the process that we go through. And I think what gets missed a lot of times, and it's very simple, is when I sit down with a client, the first thing I ask them is, what is your definition of success for this project?
Yep.
Both qualitatively as well as quantitatively. So quantitatively, what are the financial constraints of this project that we need to understand? What are you budgeting for this? Why are you budgeting that much for this? If it's an operational client, that might be from their operational budget in their company, and they're saying, this is how much money that we've allocated out of our operating budget for this project. If it's a revenue generating client, what does your pro forma look like?
Sure.
And you might not be able to, depending on your experience with the business, be able to define that upfront. But that's also the piece of this is important too, where working with us, we can help you figure that out, but we need to know if you know that or not.
Gotcha.
So there's the quantitative piece as well as the qualitative. Like, there is an art as well as a science to the building industry, where you are creating places that people engage with. And that's where I think things get lost a little bit too, with if people don't understand what the balance is between the qualitative aspects of the space as well as the quantitative, they might have trouble defining project success. And if they're looking broadly for people to help them to define that, there might be too many voices for them to vet,
Sure.
which is having a partner like us can help them strategically weigh what those priorities are and then define what that project charter is that defines success. And that helps the process stay disciplined from beginning to end in terms of how decisions get made.
So just kind of bringing the conversation to a close. So the quality assurance piece is something they're looking to solve for.
Mm-hmm.
It could be different if they're doing it for revenue or for cost savings, like in terms of engaging your services. They're looking to de-risk time or cost, principally. You do have some sort of engagement for engineering quality. That's not really where you play. You've got your IP that you put together in terms of your methodology, that you basically the system that you sell. The time wall that they feel is typically external, but it's defined. Like they've got to have this in place by a certain time, and there's also the cost of money. Like they can't, a project can't be commissioned and just drag on forever. So it's got to hit a timeline. It could be a business case, like you mentioned, the student side of things, where there's people that got to be in there. What objections do you typically hear?
I think I won't call them necessarily objections. I think what clients typically want to hear is, do you have experience delivering something that suits our needs?
Sure.
And it could, because there's lots of vendors out there who, again, service different parts of the industry. And I think for them, quality assurance is more so, again, this is the way the industry typically operates. Quality assurance is defined through experience delivering the product that we need. And my response is, quality assurance and risk mitigation is actually a much more technical thing that we can provide. Again, there are areas of expertise that I have and can help clients with in certain disciplines and certain types of product. But I think stepping back, the project delivery service that we're providing, that I would like to get more specific about what we're doing to help mitigate that. So, strategically, design wise, yes, we'll partner with any vendor with any expertise and any product type. But what we're doing is we're that second layer for owner's representation, where we will provide quality assurance regardless of the type of product.
Got it.
So that's how we'd circle back around on that.
So when you're talking to a younger you, or folks that are getting into the business and getting into the sales cycle, that are looking to find hell yes, what advice would you give them when they're starting things out?
I think you really need to put yourself in the shoes of the owner. And I think, again, this is a challenging industry because a lot of service providers on the project side they're only partnered with the client up to delivery. They don't get that operational insight afterwards, because every client is building real estate either to sell it or to basically be an operator, to be a property manager.
Sure.
So that's another area where, I think I've gotten the most useful experience is operating these properties afterwards. And that's where I think I have a more compelling case for, helping clients, as I've been the client. So I think getting that operational insight is really the most useful tool for anybody that wants to be able to, be a project service provider and be able to provide more compelling service, products for a potential client, is having that insight.
So listen to the owner for what? I didn't catch it.
I think it's being able to understand what the client actually has to do with the property afterwards.
What's the client's objective? What's their time? Oh, I see. Are they going to run it, or are they going to flip it?
Are they going to run it? Are they going to flip it? But actually, like, what does running that mean for them? So operationally, like, how are they making money off of this product?
What's their business?
Or what's their business, and how are they using this?
I got you.
And sometimes that gets, as simple as it sounds, it gets kind of lost, because like I was saying, those project providers might not have any experience operating property themselves. So that's, I think, where there's another major disconnect in this area, in this field, where the providers that are, helping design and construct these projects don't have to deal with the project once it's commissioned.
Mhm.
So they don't see all the little headaches that the client's dealing with in terms of how are they operationally running this? How are they submetering the project? What kinds of failures are they having? What kinds of devices and equipment are working for their needs and what aren't? So that's, I think, the sooner that you can start to understand the nuances of the complications of running properties, you can be a more effective provider at the front end, because you're going to be able to be a more effective advisor to your clients.
Right. If they intend to run them.
If they intend to run them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Somebody will be. And again, it's a reputation too, because even if you are building product and selling it, if you are selling it to somebody who is having challenges running that property, operating that property, that's going to start to tarnish your brand as well.
Yep.
If you are a merchant builder.
So so know the business that they're in.
Yeah.
Got it. How they get, I mean, one of my favorite, follow the money, which is kind of like, it's a overused, but follow the money, know how they get paid.
Exactly.
Right? It can be as simple as that.
Yes.
It sounds like flippant, but it can be as simple as that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Who should we talk to next?
I got a couple ideas for you.
Okay.
And again, I guess I want to know, like, what kinds of people are you interested in talking to? It sounds like you a lot of the people that listen to this podcast are sort of real estate tech and prop tech focused.
It can be. I mean, I'm looking for, like, we had a run of that. And I think that there's an opportunity to kind of broaden it a little bit more. Like, appreciate this conversation today and speaking to people that have a repeatable sales model, right? They know the problem, they know the audience, they know how, and they know what they sell. And so, yeah, operators, I'd love to chat to these merchant builders, like folks that are ultimately out there. But again, how do they make money, right? And so, what operators for residential, a student operator would be really cool to chat with.
Yeah,
having that chat to too many of them, because they all have to sell something.
Yeah.
And so, like, who do you sell to, and why are they buying?
So
why are they buying, and why are you a good fit? Is probably a better way of putting it.
Yeah.
And I'd be really curious to chat with them. So if you have some of those in your network, we'd love to, we can get back offline, but to chat a few of those.
Yeah.
How can people get a hold of you and Notera if they're looking for quality assurance experience in some of their buildings, their complex buildings?
The website is probably the easiest place, nautare.com, nautare.com. Also, LinkedIn is pretty much my main social platform. So you can find me there and see a little bit more about my background, and always happy to connect with people through that.
Excellent. Thanks very much. And thanks for everyone for listening today. If you're following us in the podcast on Apple or Spotify, please link, subscribe, and download. That always helps up. Leave some comments and reviews. Those are always outstanding to see. You can find me on LinkedIn as well. If you are not connected to me, shoot me a DM. Love to chat with you about that. And if you want to be a guest, shoot me a DM on LinkedIn as well. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Appreciate your time today. Keith, thank you for sharing tons of valuable insights, specifically around the development side of things. Like I said, we haven't chatted too much about that. So it's awesome to kind of like shed that light in the conversation, because ultimately we're all selling something. And it's important to, take that grit out of people's lives so they can kind of think about their lives differently. So appreciate that. Awesome. Sure. Thanks everyone for listening, and tune in next time. Tomorrow I've got Ray Hepson from Property Mill. So excited to chat with Ray and hear what he's up to. He's had a busy Q1 already. So we'll chat with him tomorrow. Thanks everyone. Take care. Bye.
Thank you.